So the 7 Habits principles changed my life. In 1991, I was in the middle of the season. I was at the bottom of a deep hole of victimization, depression, anxiety. I mean, it was just terrible. I didn't realize it, but I started to dig a hole. Now, if you would have asked me at the time who was digging the hole, I would have said everyone else was digging the hole. But what was hard was that every expectation, everything that I did wasn't good enough. Being in San Francisco was amazing. I loved it. I was the interloper. I was the one that, wasn't there first, and Joe was the king. Our relationship was fine. It just was, we both wanted the same job. My purpose, it was thwarted. Like I started to get, I got depressed, and I started to play worse. Getting up and going to work, it just felt as heavy as I'd ever felt before in my life. And I remember thinking, I have got to get out of here. I decided to get on a Delta flight to Salt Lake to see my brother. And I remember walking around the streets around the med school up at the U, explaining to him how terrible the situation was. And I remember him looking at me like, hey, I got 2 kids in med school. I'm broke, and you're getting paid all this money. Like, I don't get it, And I was like, oh man, this is not helping. So I got on the plane to go back on Tuesday night and sat down next to the great Steve Covey. And I remember him saying, so how's it going? And then I spent, the next 15, 20, maybe even 30 minutes describing what I just described to you. And I did not hold back. I was in a space where, I wanted other people to know how terrible this was. He listened, and I finished. And I remember he actually goes, whew, wow, that's a lot. I just got a couple questions for you. And I go, yeah. And he asked me about our owner, Eddie DeBartolo. I said, oh my gosh, he's the one that, he sees players as partners. And then he said, and another question is, tell me about your coach, Bill Walsh. And I'm like, oh my gosh, talk about innovation and forward thinking. And then he said, one last question, is Joe Montana's on the team, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the problem. He said, but if you could go ask him as a mentor, could you go ask him questions? And he'd answer you for mentorship? And I go, yeah, I guess, yeah. And then he stopped, and I remember this so vividly. Steve, I gotta be honest with you, I don't know that I've ever seen a better platform for someone who's on it to go see how good they could get than the one that you have. I remember getting off the plane in San Jose, and I remember feeling like a paradigm, like it just went like that. All of my depression and anxiety and victimization became opportunity. And I left behind all the comparisons and all that. Like, it was absolutely a paradigm shift.
He's got this momentum now that I hope carries into their next game.
Steve Young showed us today that the 49ers are still alive, and nothing seems to be holding him back.
From the deepest hole to MVP of the NFL. How does that happen? The end in mind for me was this idea that the whole situation can be around self-improvement. Like, focus on how good you can get. Like, how good can you be at this? I was a better teammate. I was a better leader. I was somebody that was aware of more of others. Before, I was completely just self-focused. Vulnerability is strength. Vulnerability is the superpower. That's the amazing irony. Opening up and willing to take the risks. Once you are willing to say that about yourself, that I might not be where I think I am, or I'm not sure I want to know, but I'm willing to dive in, that vulnerability will be the door to start to bring forward the opportunities that I think the 7 Habits bring to people. It's more than ripple effects, it's a tsunami of goodness, right? It's the potential of what could be. And I know Dr. Covey really, I think he intuitively knew this, that the effect of it would multiply. It was as if you could take that in and start to build relationships of abundance, every interaction's another relationship. He knew that if I could teach one person and then that person now becomes a teacher of the same principles, and pretty soon we have 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million, a billion people. That's the spirit of what I think the books were really about. He knew that it would last if people could take it in.